to give some background information about why this podcast episode is so important to me and why I was so excited to have Dita on this podcast. As many of you might already know, I'm Albanian. Dita is also Albanian. Albania is a beautiful country in Southeast Europe, surrounded by countries such as North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Kosovo, which are all filled with Albanian people. My family moved here when I was 8 years old. We moved to the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, which there is a huge Albanian community there, which it was great. I was super involved with the community. I was the host of some Albanian events, doing the things that really kept me close to my country, regardless of how far we were. This definitely made my family proud. I felt like I was this quote-unquote good Albanian girl that they wanted me to be. I didn't even realize that this wasn't fully resonating with me until I got a little bit older and I started to realize how much I would think whether my actions were going to be accepted by the Albanian community that I was around. I started to see that I was not fully resonating with the person that I was. Even my personality felt super fabricated, and I felt like I was conforming to these ideals that weren't necessarily mine. My parents are, with the times in a lot of ways, but they still didn't seem to want to let me fully be myself. A lot of it came from the fear that they felt around their community judging them. And we talk about it more in this episode, but Dita talks about how that is very normal when it comes to ancestrally. We want to be accepted by our tribe. So as time went on, I started to embody myself more and more and just stripped down the walls that felt like they were not me. That's what inspired me to start my podcast in 2020. I just felt super inspired at the time to start this podcast and talk about the things that I had gone through, as well as be a voice for people and girls specifically in the Albanian culture who feel like their voice isn't heard. They feel as though they're crazy if they want to step outside of what a quote-unquote Albanian girl should act like. As I would release, I would always have this rush of fear come through me that was revolving around the fact that some of my Albanian family friends or even parents and aunts and uncles would come across my podcast and judge me. And as I was recording, I came across Dita's podcast called Vajza e Gra. I was like, whoa, other people are talking about this. And it gave me this intense passion to keep going. Dita's energy and her way of being so vulnerable and authentic really spoke to me. I felt super called to her, and so I was like, I need to reach out to this girl. She is doing something brave, and I really admire that. And so I reached out to her and invited her on this podcast because I felt as though it would be a blessing to have her on this podcast and allow her to share her story and her truth, as well as give permission to anyone who's listening to live their life on their terms. I truly believe that to fully celebrate the incredible parts about our culture, we need to speak up about the things that are hindering us from leveling up as a community. Throughout this journey that I've been on of really learning who I am and how I want to show up in the world, I feel like there's some obstacles that I've come across that at times made me feel as though I was never going to be understood. But what I've realized is that when we live through the soul, other people, including your parents or others who you may not have thought would notice that, they end up actually seeing you. And if you live from the heart and you're showing up with love towards others, your relationships actually end up getting better. And that's what I've realized with my own parents. And so I just want to give a shout out to them also for going through this journey with me, because a lot of times I did make them go through the lessons with me, and we both learned a lot throughout the process. And I'm just so grateful that regardless of the struggles we've been through, we've always stuck by each other's side, and I just feel super grateful. And that's why this wave of Simply Being podcast will be one that I don't think has been experienced before, because I'm more aligned to my truth than I've ever been. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Simply Being, Dita. when I started this podcast, I had no idea that people were talking about this. And when I came across your podcast, it was like a very much like aha moment of this is something that I've needed to hear. And then other people need to hear what I have to say. So let's just speak up.
That's another reason why I created the podcast, because I felt like I was being gaslit my entire life. I was like, does nobody see what's going on? Like, am I the only person who sees this shit? Like, there has to be other women who go through what I went through. Like, I literally felt so alone my entire life because I'm like, I'm going through this experience. And I'm like, but everyone else around us is making us feel like we're the ones who are going crazy. And I'm like, I feel like we're being gaslit. So, like, me putting myself out there was also seeking answers and seeking other, like, are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? Are you guys experiencing what I'm experiencing? And that's why I feel like I experience a lot of self-doubt, because when you're not getting reassured, like, no, these are actual things, like sometimes you feel like, I don't know, like there's no point in speaking, or sometimes you're like, is this even like an issue?
Everything you're saying is spot on, and like it's everything I've wanted to hear, you know, and on this podcast for a while. I think it's just so important because the people who are relating to me a lot of times are going through these things, because that's how we like attract one another. I'm like debating if I want to get right into it, but you guys were talking about how you when people over there, if like their daughter comes in for like an internship or like some kind of thing, they accept whoever they met out here, and like they're more welcoming of them meeting someone outside of the culture. And I actually had something that I thought about that really like spoke to me, and it was, dude, over there also, like people that are over there don't have this feeling that like, okay, I betrayed my culture and I left the country. And I feel like when people move here, do you think that they just kind of feel this internal like, okay, I left my struggling country to find better, and like I need to make sure that I actually put all the values and everything onto my kid enough so that they would want to be with someone of this culture? And then if you dig deeper, it's because a lot of people there experience a genocide and like all these wars like within their lifetime, and so they kind of feel like other people are traitors.
Our history proves that we're very vulnerable. It's two third world countries that have survived genocide and corruption, and so I think that the like literally that is the main issue of people in the diaspora, is like facing this very sort of strict, forced culture, because there's so much fear of losing it when you move away from it and you're not surrounded by it, so you lose touch with it. And so the fear of losing the culture is heightened when you're outside of the motherland and you know, a part of the diaspora. So I think that a majority of the issues that we face, a majority of the restrictions that we go through are due to this fear of losing our culture, because of everything that we went through, which is, you know, you have to sympathize with, but I think it's causing more harm than good. So yeah, I mean, I say this all the time, is like, I'm more attracted to Albanian men that live in Kosovo and Albania, because they're more open-minded. And it doesn't necessarily mean like liberal or like westernized. That's not what I mean. Just more open-minded, more relaxed about, you know, certain things. And obviously you have those that are still, you know,
100%. I completely, like, I literally know exactly what you mean.
And it's because like the Albanian men that I've experienced in America, they carry that fear and that anger and that sort of like rigid mentality. And it's hard to like,
I agree.
It's just hard to relate. Like, it's just like, yeah.
100%. I agree. I feel like here they try to have this like, I actually, oh my God, I'm onto something with you really inspired me. So 100%. And I have seen it in a way that's like, maybe it's because they're being suppressed by their family members, and they're like, you know, around these like American girls or like people of not of their culture, and they feel like they can't even take them seriously, or like, oh, even if they fall in love with someone, they literally have to like break that tie because they're parents or whatever. So then they just have to like make themselves believe that like, oh, I need to be of this culture, right? Because they have to convince themselves one way or another, which that's a whole topic of its own. Like just the whole concept that I've heard of
literally people being in love with a woman and then having their parents have another girl back home be like ready to marry them. It's just a total recipe for disaster.
It's so funny that you say that because the next podcast interview that I'm doing is with a Albanian boy who's dating an American girl.
Oh,
And his girlfriend reached out to me and was like, I found your podcast. I'm dating this Albanian guy. He goes through a lot of what you went through. Like
mm-hmm.
he like you know, she kind of alluded to the fact that his family doesn't take her serious or their relationship serious. So that's so interesting because that's my next podcast episode. And I'm going to also talk about this on the episode. I went on a date with an Albanian guy from New York. I know, fucking crazy. Like, I went on a date with him, and he was in a 2-year relationship with an American girl, and they had just broken up, and he was saying things like, oh yeah, like I was just with her, whatever, but I know that I have to marry an Albanian girl. And I was looking at him and I was like, do you really believe that? Like, are you just talking like through your parents? Like, I felt kind of bad because I knew that he clearly like
Loves
spent 2 years with this girl, you know? Like, I'm like, come on, man. But you also, and I've been thinking about this all morning, actually. It's so funny that you brought this up. It's so divine.
Yeah.
But you have, I guess, like, what I'm trying to figure out, because I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying dating outside of the culture is bad. And I'm not saying that, you know, breaking up with someone because you want to marry someone in the culture is bad. I don't really
Like,
know
it's
where I
good.
stand, you know, but it's just something that I'm curious about. And I guess what I want to explore around it is like both the good and the bad, because we can look at Albanian guys and be like, oh my God, like you're just using these girls, like blah, blah, blah. But then you have to think about it, is like nobody wants to be like exiled from the tribe. And these Albanian men, like, also have a lot of pressure that I feel like we don't talk about. Like Albanian men be going through it too.
100%.
And they have this pressure to have a certain type of household, to have a certain type of wife. So I feel like in the same way where a lot of roles are forced upon us as Albanian women, the same can be said with Albanian men. Like,
yeah.
And so sometimes I feel like even they're not living for themselves, and they just sort of are like, oh, I'm supposed to marry an Albanian good girl, virgin, who can, you know, take care of my mom, who will live in the house with us. And so, but I also respect that though, because I'm like, because, you know, you're respecting the family, you're respecting the tribal, you know, mentality, you know, but then you are being a little unauthentic to yourself. So that's kind of the bad. So I just don't know where I stand. It's just interesting to explore though.
I love that you brought it up. And I love that you have a voice for like all parts involved, because it's true. Like, imagine bringing an American girl to your house and like they have to be okay with like your parents, like you said, wanting you to live with them and do all these things. And then as an Albanian guy, you're like, I don't want to put this random girl through this.
Yeah.
Literally would never do it. And then they get an Albanian girl. And then I also want to talk about the fact that sometimes though, people think because someone's Albanian, they're going to be willing to do that. I have family members that like went and like did the traditions and everything. And then they realized, yeah, this girl's Albanian, but like she's literally so Americanized and like did not expect this reality. And then they go through issues because of that too. So it's just a really great topic to bring up. I've been kind of scared to talk about this stuff because a lot of times like I'll like have someone on here and I'm like, I don't know how like deep they're trying to go. But with you, because I've heard your podcast, I'm like, okay, like we have
I go deep, babe. Like literally.
So in terms of like choosing to, how do I want to put this? So I sent you a voice memo about this, how like it's a constant choice whether we want to relive this generational, you know, these generational patterns, or if we want to break them now and live authentically, which we'll all develop trauma regardless, but like try to, you know, use our time on earth to actually get closer to our higher selves as opposed to reliving like traumas that our parents and grandparents have gone through. And I wanted to ask, like, when was a point in your life or when was something that happened that actually you were put to the test with this kind of thing where it's like, I really badly want to listen to what the right thing to do for an Albanian girl that's perfect is versus like following your heart, and kind of going through that process of what that was like?
That is such a good question. I don't think I've ever reflected on this, of like pinpointing an exact experience, I think honestly, like I can't remember a time when I didn't like
That's a good answer.
think this way. I really don't. You know, what I could say though is like when I was like going into high school, I
Mhm.
was like way more educated and well-rounded.
Mhm.
Um, I was just immersed into like a beautiful New York City diverse, high school. So I was very, very lucky and privileged to go to such a prestigious school.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess it just added like fuel and it like reassured me of a lot of things. I don't know. Does that sort of answer your question?
100%. You feel as though that helped you be able to live that truth more?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Like when I was in middle school, I was going to a middle school and, elementary kindergarten, like in my neighborhood. So like
Mhm.
my parents were picking me up from school, dropping me off.
Yeah.
I went to school with my cousin. So either we were at my house or at my cousin's house. Like it was
Yeah.
very sheltered. I was very sheltered
Mhm.
growing up. And then when I went to high school, it was like, all right, you got to take the train by yourself. You're going into Manhattan, you're going into the big city.
I
And
get it.
so I was alone. I was alone for the first time, and I was able to experience different things and different people, and I wasn't as sheltered anymore. So
Yeah.
it really broadened my horizon, and I think that that's what contributed a lot to that.
That's beautiful. Would you say that, because you've talked about this and how like it's hard for people to understand you when you're growing up and you're Albanian, like when you were in high school, did you feel like you broke away from that a bit? Or like was that your rebellion phase? I know you've talked about that.
So when I was in high school, my friends were my life.
Mm,
Like my friends were my absolute life. Like made me feel they just made me feel really great. And they made me feel like I could be the person that I wanted to be. And
mhm.
so I had that liberty to do so with my friends. Um, yeah. I don't know. I'm just so thankful of that. And I think that the more that I realize, you know what it is actually, the more that I realized that I had security and safety and connection outside of my family,
Mhm.
the more I was willing to rebel because, I wasn't in that sheltered world anymore.
Yeah.
When you're in a sheltered world and these tribal mentalities are being ingrained in you, it's scary to think that like you could ever rebel because it's like, who do I fall back on? What
Mhm.
support system do I have? So you kind of comply.
Wow.
So, you
Yeah.
know, finding my soul tribe, my friends, even like other adults, like my teachers, my guidance counselors outside of my family, made it easier for me to say no, and made it easier for me to be like, I'm not fucking doing that. I'm not behaving like that. I don't fucking need to. You want to fucking kick me
Mhm.
out the house? Cool. Like, like,
I can go to this girl's house. Like,
yeah, I'll sleep in a church. I don't care. So it like, it granted me that sort of broader horizon that I feel like a lot of people who are in sheltered conservative cultures don't have. And that's why they comply and they're more
yeah.
obedient. And that's why there's strict parents who don't want you to seek friends and have that support system outside because they know if you have a support system outside of what this is right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you agree and you are inspired to be the person that you want to be with those other people, you're gonna like, you're not gonna listen to us, you're not gonna stay with us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very beautiful. And that's why people, yeah, that's why parents don't want that. But then it's like, how do those kids that feel super controlled do it? Well, maybe when you have the chance to get out of the house, you actually do it and
Yeah.
you take the opportunities to be able to create those friendships and connections that are outside of what you're conformed to growing up. And that's like, what kind of advice is that when like, I don't want to make people want to rebel in a way that's unhealthy. However, I also do want to give power to those who, want to live their life their way and feel very controlled and like sick in a way. Cause like it makes you literally mentally incapable of trusting yourself if you're constantly being told what to
Yeah.
do. And yeah, I have a lot of emotion, of course, like built into this. And I feel like I taught my parents from a young age that I won't listen in the way that you're saying. I actually went away to college. I was a few hours away.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
right? Like,
Surprising.
but when it comes to school, like my parents are both in the medical field and actually left when my dad finished his residency of medical school in Albania and like literally saw the opportunity to live a better life here and started from scratch. And so for him, school was like the way to really make him proud, like to make him feel like he made the right choice. So they really like valued that. And so that also gave me the opportunity though to, like you're saying, see that, wait, okay, this is what I value.
You brought up such a good point, actually, that really stuck with me is that, listen, I got very lucky. To be honest, I consider myself a very, very lucky girl. And so me in my rebellious nature, although I was susceptible to unfulfilling relationships, you know, people who aren't bad for me, the universe was always on my side and sort of like protected me and guided me through that. But there is, like, when I say I was rebellious and I sort of talk about my experience, I'm not telling everyone to like say fuck you and like, you know, rebel like to intentionally, because there's also that element of like being susceptible to the wrong people. Like it's like when you're so desperate for human connection, sometimes you'll settle for people who aren't good for you. And so I mean, you see that all the time. And so it's so scary. Like, although I want to encourage girls to like do whatever the fuck you want, like just fucking do it. There is also that scary part where it's like, don't put yourself in danger though. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like this, so it's, and I think that's also what parents are afraid of like you putting yourself in danger. But I don't think that parents understand that you're actually leading them into these unfulfilled relationships. Like, if your child is fulfilled at home and is seen and is nurtured and is emotionally taken care of, they're not going to go with the crackheads. And you know, they're not going to go sleep with every guy that they see, because they don't need that, because they have the connection there. And so the more strict you are with your kids and the more that you sort of emotionally neglect them, the more they're going to do those things.
Oh yeah.
You know?
100%. And you know, that actually, I had that as a note to touch on, and it's so, that's why it is very divine. And like, we're definitely having this conversation for a reason. And but 100%. Cause like, also with that, it's like, if your daughter, let's say, is dating a guy and like, he's actually like a cool dude and like actually cares about her, he's going to want to meet the parents, do all these things. Well, you being super strict and like having all these blockages of like, you can't date because you're, you know what I mean? I'm scared of like who this guy is or whatever. It actually leads them, like you said, with the crackheads or people who like don't even want to meet the parents or don't give a shit if she even has a you know? Or like the fun. I remember there was a time I was in high school and we were at a football game, and literally the one dude that invited us all was like the nicest, like he was really nice to all the girls, and like the mom was going to be there, ordered pizza for us. My mom called me, so I, for the first time, I think, was finally honest with her, and I was like, "Oh, we're at Jeff's house." That was his name.
Yeah.
And she had her and my aunt come pick me up, okay, at Jeff's house when the mom was there. Like, it was the most embarrassing thing. And that's when I had this like realization of I'm never telling them anything. And then after that, I actually ended up going to people's houses where the mom wasn't there, like there's no pizza involved.
Yeah.
I just never knew, when in reality, if we had a really good experience there, I would have felt so much more comfortable telling my mom things. And at the end of the day, a lot of the advice she's given me has been life-changing. Like, I've always come to terms with like, whoa, she was actually right about this. But the way of going about it was very much through fear. Literally, my mom opening my phone and just being at the side of my bed, and she had read everything.
Dude, the breach of trust between like a mother and like her daughter about a boy, it was like, I experienced that at a very young age, and it traumatized me. Until this day, I cannot talk to I'm 25 years old. I cannot talk to my mom about boys because of that one thing that she did, going through my messages when I was a child. And I had like my first like little boyfriend.
Yeah.
Like, nobody understands the psychological damage that causes. Oh my, I talk about it in therapy all the time. The breach in trust is very hard too. heal. It literally, like to this day, like thinking about it, I just want to like sink. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like this feeling where I'm like sinking into my own skin. It's so bad.
This work, generational stuff, and like speaking up about it is like part of your life mission.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I even like, based on my birth chart, based on like all the readings I've gotten, like regarding this, it's very much apparent that like education and public speaking are part of like my destiny. And so that's why I feel extremely fulfilled with what I'm doing right now. Like I cannot tell you how much joy it brings me. And it's something that, not to toot my own horn, but it's something that I've always felt naturally good at. I always loved presenting when I was in high school. Like everybody feared that. I fucking loved it. Maybe it's the Leo in me. Like I just love attention. Like, yes, hear me roar, hear me talk. Like, you know.
That's sure a Leo thing.
Yeah. And
but in a good way. Like you need to be heard, you know, and like having that confidence, you're giving others the permission to. And because it's like, Leo, yes, you love attention, but also like you have a lot to give and to offer. And a lot of people could benefit from that and could use that fuel for themselves. So that's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's how I see it too.
And how do you feel? So many things are coming to mind because I just thought Dua Lipa's a Leo, right? And like I just knew that because of her birthday. But regardless, I've thought about that too, and like how she uses her power, and you know, she will do something, and like it'll be, of course, like very out there, like even just like her Barbie that I loved, the like red carpet look where she just like had her dress with like nothing under. And I feel like if anyone did that at like an Albanian party, they would like freak out. But also it's like she had to go through these same probably mental things to actually get to a point where she doesn't give a fuck if other people are judging her. And I just bring her up because I want that to be inspiration for like little girls who feel as though they need to make like their communities happy, to realize like you have so much power that you can focus on the fact that you can inspire millions of people, even if your close community could be judging you. That's just something that's come up for me because that's someone that's like in the public eye and that I've looked up to in a way because I want to be someone that can inspire others by just being themselves and like reaching their dreams.
That's a very interesting point, and you actually just inspired like a point of view that I never really considered before. But well, first of all, Dua Lipa is unique because she is a superstar. So there's always going to be the pressure as a female artist to be sexualized or to wear, you know, the most fabulous provocative clothing and, you know, pose naked and whatever. That's just always been the case with artists, like female artists, like to a degree, like your modesty is going to be tested due to the high demand of the industry. And I think that regardless if her parents approved or not, she has to fucking do it, you know? But right. And a point that you brought up that I want to elaborate off of is like, I think this is such a clear testament to tell these young girls, like, it's an issue until you make it. Now, do you know what I mean? If Dua Lipa was not Dua Lipa and she was wearing that dress out, the entire Albanian community will be calling her all types of names, right? But it's the simple fact that she's a successful world pop star. That's what makes it okay. And so what I want Albanian girls to kind of get from that is like, your value is there. It's the people around you that are going to choose how they're going to interpret you. So they're glorifying Dua Lipa for wearing a provocative dress. Like, let's just say it's provocative because the way you described it, she was naked. I didn't see the dress.
It was just a really cute, like, she just didn't have a bra and it was like she was wearing like panties and stuff. But regardless, like it was provocative and that's possible to me.
Yeah, pop off. But you see like how there's sort of praise with that because of her title and who she is versus the kind of ridicule that a girl otherwise would face. So it's not necessarily what you're doing, it's how the people around you are interpreting it. And so don't get warped up into that because, you know, it's kind of the saying of like, people think you're delusional until you make it. Like people like will be like, oh, this girl is trying to be a singer, like blah blah blah, like she's so like delusional. And then when you make it and you're a world pop star, everybody's like, oh, like you have permission to, you know, do what you want without my job. You know, do you understand what I'm saying?
100%.
Yeah, there's such a double standard.
It's a double standard, and it's also something that we can use as inspiration, because if you, for example, are getting judged at first, if you know that what you're doing is for your own success, whether that's money or just like pure success of like being happy, then the people at the end of the journey are going to look at you and judge you based on what you accomplished for yourself. And if they want to judge you throughout the process, like just keep your goal in mind, and you know, of like, yes, I'm being judged, but I'd rather be alone or I wouldn't want to be alone, but I'd rather not be supported by people who wouldn't support me anyway, like at the end, than live my life for their approval. And then at the end, if I'm unhappy and I can't accomplish anything because I'm in the state of fear and the state of like survival, then either way, I'm not going to feel fulfilled because I didn't do what I wanted. There's like,
Just,
it's hard to speak up about this.
Think about it. Like, Dua Lipa was probably facing like shit talking family members when she was releasing music or posing certain types of ways and posting it on social media. I'm fucking sure she has faced that. But look at where the fuck she is today. Like, you know, she powered through it. And I think that that's that, you know, in itself, you know, I'm making an assumption of her journey though, but from what I have gone through, I feel like it's very, you know, kind of a given that she would go through that.
100%.
But like, you know, who cares at this point? Like when you make it, like it doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't matter.
And like, would you rather make it in the whole world or make it in this like small little like Albanian circle? Some people literally think that's their world, and maybe they're so in fear of disappointing people and having others talk shit about their family or their parents because they turned out this certain way, then they're not looking past that wall of like, dude, there's a whole world right in front of you. It's interesting. This type of work really interests me. So I don't know exactly where my role is, but I definitely agree that one of them is just sharing my story and sharing like the things that have caused me to stay secluded and then what helped me break through.
I know. I love the conversation we're having because sometimes I feel like I'll hit like a roadblock of like things to explore, but even after this conversation, I know I'm just gonna go to my journal and be like, I have to touch on this, like I have to talk about this. Like I love this.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That makes me really happy, because I actually did make a point to reach out to you because I was like, you know what, like these conversations are the ones that I want to have. And like you said, there's an ego with social media, but also I appreciated that you like followed me and you wanted to connect. And it shows that we can connect with people so far away as long as we make the effort. And that's what I want to also put out there. Like we, you know, both have busy lives and like things on our mind that we need to work on. So clearly we do value this topic and this like exploration and integration so much that we want to talk about it. And I would hope to have like a place where we can all meet up and like talk about these things openly and like kind of bring in this invitation and this permission to people to be themselves. Because that's something that I know people struggle with. Like I think there's a lot of blockages in like also the divine feminine with our culture. Like for me, with my mom, she's someone who's like educated and got to like do her own thing, and still there's that blockage. So I also want to make a last point to that is I've heard that, you know, when you have a kid, like let's say a mom has a daughter, they're raising them to be at the level of confidence that they are while they're raising them.
Yeah, I think when I started to think about my mom that way, I get like really sad, because I think that now as an adult, I get really sad. But growing up, I was always angry with her. Like, why do you instill your limiting beliefs, your prudeness, your, you know, conservative ideology? My mom's the biggest prude. I'm like, girl, like girly pop. But
love that we can relate on that, dude.
I mean, you know, our mothers can only teach us as much as they know themselves. And you know, another thing that I notice about that also, and this actually might sound a little controversial, but I think that that's why, you know, there's so much wounding within the Albanian community with girls and their mothers because there is, to be honest, jealousy, I think. I think that there's jealousy and there's so many things that a young Albanian girl will trigger in her mother and will face the consequence of those triggers, not knowing why, because probably the mother doesn't even know why. Like, why am I calling my daughter a whore for going to hang out with her friends? Like, you don't actually think your daughter is a whore, you're just projecting, you know? And so, but that's so detrimental to a young Albanian girl, like being affected by the mother wound. This is another episode that I'm thinking about, is just like the mother wound, the relationships between Albanian girls and their moms. It's really an interesting thing to explore.
100%. Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned jealousy because that's hard to talk about, but it definitely is. Like, you know, my mom got married when she was 20. Like, my mom basically told me when she found out I had sex, like before marriage, that I would never find a husband. Like, she's like, nobody's gonna want you. And so for me, I started to feel like really gross about myself. Until recently, I'm like very open because I want to release the shame and also resonate with those who are willing to receive it.
Listen, like, you know, I respect my mom and I care about my mom, but, you know, she said a lot of fucked up shit like that to me when I was young, you know, and she allowed people to tell me, you know, you're worthless if you're not a virgin. Because even if she didn't tell me these things directly, she still enabled it by not saying, Dita, don't listen to them. You are fine if you're, you know, not a virgin, whatever. So she was complicit in this, but what the fuck did she know? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not her fault, essentially. Like, I mean, everybody should be held accountable for their own beliefs and, you know, be introspective. But, you know, I experienced that too, of just like shame and embarrassment. And I'm like, it's not like it's a you thing, you know? Which is very interesting.
Thank you for sharing. So how do you go about it in the sense that do you choose to not tell her most things? Because I actually am learning from this because for me, like I honestly am, even when I have like an Albanian person on my podcast that I think they need to listen to and like learn from, I don't tell them yet until I'm done with it because I don't want them to put me in a negative mood. You know what I mean? Like, what could you share that others are going to want to learn from instead of being embarrassed that you're just telling them your whole life story? I'm like,
oh my God, yeah, I've heard that before. Of like, stop airing out your dirty laundry. Like, stop. Like, people are gonna talk shit. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck because I've everything that I'm telling, I owned. Like, there's no shame, there's no embarrassment, there's nothing you can tell me that's gonna make me, you know, not believe what I'm saying. Like, I'm okay with sharing these things because I've come to terms with them. You know, it's not a fucking secret.
I know. And like, the more you speak on it, the more you are literally telling yourself that you're accepting it and that you're moving through it. But if you just continue to keep it in you and not release it, then you actually are doing so much more harm for yourself and generations moving forward, because then you're going to have this like blockage with your own kid, maybe because you haven't processed the stuff with your own parent. This is super healing, like I'm sure for the listener, but also for me.
You know, you actually mentioned something. We were having a discussion earlier and you said something and I really wanted to comment on it. So I'm going to do it now. But you said something about like, you know, being reluctant to reach out. And as we're like having this conversation, I can just tell that we are so similar. Like we're actually so similar, which brings me so much comfort. And, you know, for me, it's like if an Albanian girl is going to reach out to me and wants to have a conversation, like automatically, yes. Like there's just like, you know what I mean? Like I love connecting with like other Albanian girls. And I wish that like it was more common to just do that, just be like, yes, like of course, bitch, like you know.
It makes my heart so happy. Since you mentioned astrology, like I'm Pisces Sun, Pisces Venus, Pisces Mercury, like a lot of
shut up.
Oh yeah, so for me it just like melts my heart hearing you say that, because like I'm the same way. And also like, dude, it's partly because I don't know if at first I could say this, but like just throughout the last few years, I have lived my life in a way that I do listen to my heart. I do listen to what I want to do. And so seeing someone else be embodied and confident in themselves doesn't threaten me. Like, of course, there's things about you that I want to embody and that I'm learning from, but at the core, it's just me acknowledging something in another woman that I see in myself. And that allows me to connect with you. But if I was over here, like literally conforming to every belief that my parents told me to conform to. Someone like you would literally be so difficult to have a conversation with. And that's what I think holds people back. Honestly, I recently have started to just like say my whole truth to like my cousins or people, even though like I don't think they deeply, not all of them at least, not all of them judge me, but like I just knew like it would get somewhere, whatever. But now I'm like, even if they tell their mom, like I don't care. You know what I mean? I blocked them from my stories in the past, and now it's like,
oh my God, yeah. We've all done that. I even with my family, I've always felt like such a weirdo. Like I'm literally like, so my family's pretty conservative, like obviously, or else I wouldn't be this traumatized. But they're pretty conservative, and so I was just not that growing up. And so I was always, or what it felt like I was always looked at was like the weirdo, like, oh, Dita is gonna have like a different fucking opinion, she's gonna open up her mouth and cause chaos, you know? So it was like nobody even wanted to have a conversation with me because I would just be like, no. And so there is that respect that I have for myself and my opinion, but it did create a barrier of relating to people, like other Albanian people who are conservative, because I feel like we automatically like shut each other out. Whereas like now I'm like, I can break bread with a conservative Albanian. Like you fucking, you know, you have these beliefs, great. I have different beliefs. We could still, you know, keep it a buck, respect each other's views, and you know, relate to each other in some way. You know, we don't have to, I don't think you should always 100% agree with everybody.
No.
You know, at all.
It's fine.
But and I think that like for season 1, and I say this, like I loved how raw and authentic and outspoken I was, but I think that like I at that point just didn't want to hear other people out. I was like, no, your opinion is fucking stupid. Like I don't understand where you're coming from. And kind of, you know, that dogmatic approach. And so now I'm just like, there's no use. Cause like, even if this person has different opinions, like I can still learn from them and they can still learn from me, but we just have to both mutually agree to listen to each other without judgment. But yeah, like with my cousins, I was always the black sheep. Although I had my own, you know, restrictions, I had a lot of freedom growing up. I was like the, you know, outgoing, rebellious one. They're like, oh, don't hang out with Dita. She'll take you to a fucking party, you know, at 14 years old. Yeah, like don't hang out with Dita. She's fucking all over the place. And that did, I think, create a lot of tension too between me and my cousins, because I was able to, you know, live this like just however the fuck I wanted. I was like, I'm just gonna do it. And so, and they couldn't, and like till this day I feel like can't. So I feel like, you know, there's, you know, it's still there.
Like down, which is why I think there will be so much more love between us all as a sisterhood, and there will be so much more success in the grand scheme of things if we work together. But because so many people are putting blockages on us and making us conform and form resentment and this and that, then that's why it's hard to relate to other people, because some people will have the jealousy, some people will, you know what I mean, like not be able to relate because they've never done the things that you were even talking about, you know? So I think there's so much room for growth, and clearly we all like want to be seen and want to connect, because like I didn't know Christina either. Like I literally reached out to her like a couple of years ago, and it's been now, but yeah, after seeing like, oh my God, there's Albanians that teach breath work. Like
that was crazy. I when I saw her page, I said, what? It's like, what the fuck? I did not know this existed.
This new world of healing that a lot of people still, I think, see as taboo, like breath work or like just any like chakras. They're still like, oh my God, like chashkya, like what is this? You know, so how has your experience been with that? And like, were you ever resistant to it, or did you from the beginning, like you were super open to try these new things out?
So I grew up Muslim. My family identifies as Muslim. I never resonated with the religion. I never really followed it. It wasn't forced upon me at all. It was kind of just like, oh, you're Muslim. Like you're gonna say these prayers and you don't eat pork, and sometimes we're gonna go to, you know, the mosque. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, like I kind of just blindly would identify as Muslim growing up. And I think the religion is beautiful. When I got a little older and I read the Quran. I would read the Quran on my way to high school in the train, and I was like, I don't know if I resonate with these principles. Then I was like atheist, and then I was agnostic, and I just didn't know where I stood. And it wasn't until I started, like in COVID, like had my spiritual awakening, where I started embracing like health, wellness, spirituality, frequencies, like, fucking transurfing, like reality transurfing, like all of these like scientific things, and meditating and embracing that side of spirituality. So I honestly think spirituality found me. I never actively sought it out. But it's funny because like, meditating. I remember I went over to my cousin's house one time. I'm really sitting by her pool, and I started meditating, and she was like, "What the fuck are you doing, you weirdo?" And I was like, "I'm meditating," and she was like, "That's really fucking weird." And so I would face like resistance, because they'd be like, "What is she doing?" But then I would do certain practices, like I would sage myself in my house, in my room, and my brother, my dad, and my mom would be like smelling, like, "Oh, what is that? Like, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm cleansing the energy of the house. I'm cleansing myself." And then I remember one time my mom was like, she wasn't having a good day or whatever, and she was like, "Do you have that sage? Like, do you want to try the sage on me?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so I like did the sage on her, and I would, say affirmations, like cleanse her of any negative energy, blah, blah, blah. And so now it's like a thing. Like she's like, "Oh, Dita, can you sage? Can you light sage? Can you buy sage?" So yeah. So it's like a non-linear journey. And like recently I started going to church. I go to church almost every week, and it's not because I'm Catholic or I follow the religion. It's just I love the idea of praying in a holy, atmosphere, and I also go to the biggest like church on Fifth Avenue called St. Patrick's Cathedral, and it's just so beautiful. It's where Blair Waldorf got married, by the way.
Oh, okay, that's where I've heard it, because
and it's just like a beautiful church. I just love sitting in a church and just praying and just feeling that safety. And so that's my spirituality. It's like all over the fucking place.
You described it literally beautifully. You went like from start to finish. Like the sage thing like really spoke to me, because maybe the sage like won't necessarily like be the biggest thing for your mom in her journey, but like that is an introduction to so much more. And also that's like a validating thing for you, in the sense that, do you think it like grows her trust with you a bit? Like if she feels as though you using that sage is helping her, like seeing you, she listened to you, did it herself. And then with many other things, I feel like even if she's reluctant to trust you, like I feel like that's a step in like the right direction for other things. I don't know, maybe that's a stretch, but that's what I think.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. Like if I start wearing certain pants, I see that my mom starts wearing them, I'm like, huh. You know what I mean? I think that I do lead by example, and I think a lot of kids lead by example. And at first their parents will, be like, "Oh, you're weird," or like, "What are you doing?" But then I think that they will start to like appreciate it.
For sure.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that. Like my brother and my dad, for example, like they low-key love when I put incense, but they try to act like they don't, but they'll be like, "I like it smells good," like it's just really funny. But I do think I have like an influence on them, whether they realize it or not. And I remember also one time like my mom was going through it, and I drove her to like a really scenic park. And I was like, all right, just close your eyes. We're going to meditate. And I like put on meditation in the car. And she like to this day would be like, "Oh, Dita, like, remember when we meditated in the car?" So it's hard for them to do these practices by themselves. But I think that, inviting them to do so, there's like a green light there that I've experienced.
I love that in an unplanned way, we came to this at the end of our talk, because I think it's a great spot to leave off on, because I feel as though, leading by example is beautiful in the way you put it, because if you find a practice, or if you find a way that helps you heal and helps you, get closer to that center within yourself, those are beautiful things to share with your family members. And as they see you get closer to center, and as they see you benefit from these things and these actions, that's what's going to cause change. So And that's where it's just all this like full circle of going through the difficult things. It can be hard, but at the end of the day, there is that green light at the end where it's like, you are welcoming me to actually step out of my comfort zone too. So thank you, child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Mm.
such a beautiful way to interpret it. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for coming on and for having this vulnerable conversation with me. I'm very inspired by you and your creative energy and also just your wisdom that you share. So, yeah, it was honestly a pleasure to have this conversation with you and to get to know you better.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out and inviting me. And I honestly respect the fact that like you were really reluctant to do so at first and then just still did it. Because look at what came out of it. I think this was a beautiful conversation. And I was just looking forward to it as soon as like you mentioned it. So this is really good. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you. And honestly, that's like the major thing about my podcast is really welcoming vulnerability. And that's why I'm really grateful that you opened the space for me to be able to share with you that I was reluctant. I was very nervous to be able to have this conversation, and to have it turn out in this way was just insane. And it really helps me grow more confidence in myself and my intuition. So
Yeah, and keep doing it, girl. I want to see you releasing podcast episodes.
thank
So
you so much. I'll see you later, and
all
hopefully
right.
we work together sometime soon.
All right, stay in touch.
Bye.
Bye.